My sister's fiancé laughed when he saw my truck and told me to park in the trash lot so I did not embarrass his wealthy family. He had no idea that while he was bragging about his mid-level management job, I was finalizing the paperwork to buy his entire company. By the time the wedding cake was cut, I would own everything he cared about. My name is Ethan, and at 34 years old, I am the family disappointment. Or at least that is what my sister Lily and her new in-laws believe. While they chase corporate titles and lease luxury cars to keep up appearances, I quietly run Helios Capital, a private equity firm that specializes in acquiring failing tech giants. Before I tell you how I fired my bullies at their own wedding, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the people who should love you the most. The gravel crunched loudly beneath the tires of my rusted 1990 Ford F-150 as I pulled into the circular driveway. The noise was a stark contrast to the purring engines of the Bentleys and Porsches gleaming in the afternoon sun. The Sapphire Cove Resort in the Hamptons was the kind of place where the air smelled like sea salt and old money. I rolled down the window expecting the valet to open my door, but the young man in the crisp white uniform just stared at my truck with open hostility. He actually wrinkled his nose as if he smelled something rotting. "Sir, you cannot leave that vehicle here," the valet said, stepping back and waving his hands frantically, as if shooing away a stray dog. "We have a reputation to maintain, and this is a private event for the King family." I turned off the ignition, and the truck let out a loud shudder that echoed through the elegant courtyard. Before I could explain that I was the bride's brother, a shadow fell over my open window. I looked up to see Harrison King, my sister's future father-in-law, and the vice president of Apex Solutions. He was wearing an Italian silk suit that probably cost more than my truck. He looked at me with a mixture of disgust and amusement, his eyes scanning my faded hoodie and jeans. "Ethan, I see you finally made it," Harrison said, his voice dripping with condescension. He did not offer a handshake. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He crumpled it into a ball and flicked it through my window. It landed softly on my lap. "Do yourself a favor and move this scrap metal to the public beach parking lot down the road. It is about a 2-mile walk back, but at least you will get some exercise. We cannot have our VIP guests thinking we invited the gardener to the engagement party. Now move it before you leak oil on my driveway." I looked at the money on my lap, then back at Harrison. He was already turning away, laughing with the valet about how hard it was to deal with lower-class relatives. I slowly picked up the bill. If only he knew that I had just approved the audit of his offshore accounts 20 minutes ago. I put the truck in gear and backed out. The war had just begun. The 2-mile trek back from the public beach lot was punishing. The humid ocean air, which felt refreshing near the water, turned into a suffocating blanket of heat on the asphalt road. By the time the wrought iron gates of the Sapphire Cove Resort came back into view, my gray t-shirt was dark with sweat, and my boots were covered in a fine layer of roadside dust. I could see the guests mingling on the terrace, holding flute glasses that caught the sunlight. They looked cool, composed, and impossibly distant from my current reality. I wiped my forehead with the back of my hand and straightened my spine. I was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar firm, but right now I looked exactly like what they thought I was, a loser. As I reached the grand entrance lined with manicured topiaries, Jordan stepped out from the shadows of the portico. He was waiting for me. My future brother-in-law looked like he had stepped out of a music video about excess. His suit was a jarring shade of electric blue silk tailored tight enough to cut off circulation. The interlocking G's on his belt buckle were the size of dinner plates, and a diamond-encrusted watch glinted aggressively on his wrist. He did not look like a businessman. He looked like someone pretending to be rich, which was exactly what the audit report I had read earlier confirmed. He stood squarely in the center of the doorway, blocking my path to the air conditioning. He swirled his champagne glass and looked me up and down, his lip curling in disgust. "Look at you, Ethan," Jordan said, his voice projecting loudly enough to catch the attention of a nearby cluster of guests. "You are dripping sweat on the marble. What are you doing here? Are you applying to be the gardener for the wedding? Or did you walk here because you could not afford the gas for that scrap heap you drive?" He took a step closer, invading my personal space. The smell of expensive cologne and stale alcohol wafted off him. This is my engagement party, man. Please do not breathe that smell of unemployment on my guests. It is offensive to people who actually work for a living. I held his gaze, my expression neutral. Harrison made me park at the beach, I said simply. It is a 2-mile hike. Always the victim, right? Jordan scoffed. He turned to the group of men standing near the fountain. They were his entourage junior executives at Apex Solutions, who laughed at his jokes to keep their jobs. Hey guys, come over here. I want you to meet the famous Ethan. He threw a heavy arm around my shoulder, his grip digging into my collarbone. This is Lily's older brother. He tapped the side of his head with his champagne glass and winked at his friends. He is a little slow, if you know what I mean. The lights are on, but nobody is home. We try to include him in family events as a charity case, but sometimes he gets confused about basic things, like how to dress or how to make money. The group erupted into cruel laughter. One of them, a man with slicked back hair and a red pocket square, leaned in and spoke to me in a slow, exaggerated voice like I was a toddler. Hey buddy, do you like the party? Is it fun? Do you want a juice box? My fist clenched at my side, but I forced my fingers to relax. This was the narrative they needed. To them, I had to be broken so they could feel superior. If I reacted, I would only prove them right. Jordan squeezed my shoulder harder, leaning in until his lips brushed my ear. Just play along, failure, he hissed so only I could hear. Do not embarrass me, or I will have security throw you out before you even see your sister. Now go find a corner and stay there. I pulled away from his grip and offered a vacant nod. Thank you, Jordan, I said, keeping my voice flat. It is a very nice party. As they turned back to their conversation, already dismissing me as a piece of furniture, I felt my phone vibrate against my thigh. It was the confirmation signal. The hostile takeover bid had just been initiated. I walked past them into the cool air of the lobby, leaving a trail of dust on the polished floor. Let them enjoy their joke. I was about to punch the punchline. Inside the ballroom, the air-conditioned atmosphere was a relief, but the social temperature was freezing. The room was a sea of white orchids and gold leaf accents designed to scream wealth rather than whisper it. I made my way toward the head table where a gold placard sat in the center reading the King family and honored guests. I scanned the place settings looking for my name. I saw my sister Lily's name next to Jordan's. I saw my late parents' names, which they had included for sympathy points despite never respecting them when they were alive. But my name was missing. Excuse me. I turned to see Alicia King Jordan's mother hovering behind me. She was a woman who wore her insecurity like armor draped in so much jewelry she rattled when she moved. Her smile did not reach her eyes, which were scanning the room to make sure no one important was watching her talk to me. You are looking in the wrong place, dear, Alicia said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. That table is for the board members and key stakeholders of Apex Solutions. We need to make sure the people who actually contribute to Jordan's success are comfortable. She pointed a manicured finger toward the far back corner of the room, right next to the swinging double doors of the kitchen. A small, wobbly round table sat in the shadows, almost hidden by a large decorative fern. We set up a special spot for you at table 19, she continued. You will be sitting with the staff, the nanny, the driver, and the event coordinator's assistant. We thought you would feel more at home there. You know, among your own kind. I looked at the table. The waiter was currently using it to stack dirty trays. Then I looked back at Alicia. She was waiting for me to cause a scene to prove that I was the trash she thought I was. That is perfectly fine, Alicia, I said, keeping my voice level. I prefer the company of people who work for a living anyway. Her smile faltered for a second, confused by my lack of shame. She huffed and turned away to greet a man in a tuxedo, probably another executive she was trying to impress. I walked across the room, my boots thudding softly on the plush carpet. When I sat down at table 19, the driver, a kind-looking older man named Marcus, nodded at me. Rough crowd, huh? Marcus asked, eyeing the head table. You have no idea, I replied. I pulled out my phone. The screen cracked in the corner from a drop at a construction site last week lit up my face. I opened my encrypted messaging app and typed a message to my chief financial officer, who was currently on standby in Manhattan. Target confirmed Apex Solutions, Initiate full valuation immediately. I want a hostile takeover strategy on my desk in 1 hour. I hit send. Alicia wanted me to sit with the help because she thought I had no power. She did not realize that from this wobbly table in the dark corner, I was about to buy the chair she was sitting on. The gentle chime of a silver spoon tapping against a crystal champagne flute silenced the room. Harrison King stood at the center of the dais, adjusting his silk tie with the self-importance of a man about to announce a presidential bid. The spotlight hit him perfectly, reflecting off his polished cufflinks. He cleared his throat, and the room leaned in, captivated by his aura of power and wealth. I sat back in my creaky chair at table 19 and watched the performance. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this union," Harrison began, his voice booming with practiced charisma. "When I look at my son Jordan, I do not just see a groom, I see the future of Apex Solutions. I see the embodiment of excellence. In this family, we do not just survive, we conquer. We have built a legacy from the ground up, proving that with enough intellect and drive, there is no ceiling we cannot break." Applause rippled through the room. Jordan beamed, puffing out his chest. Harrison raised a hand to quiet the crowd, his expression shifting from pride to something sharper, something cruel. But let us be honest with ourselves, friends. Not everyone is built for greatness. Nature has a way of separating the wheat from the chaff. In the business world, just like in families, there are those who create value, and there are those who simply consume it. There are the kings, and then there are the parasites, the ones who are content to ride in the passenger's seat while others drive, the ones who show up with empty pockets and expect a seat at the table. The silence in the room changed texture. It was no longer admiring, it was awkward. Everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. Harrison did not point at me, but he might as well have shown a laser pointer on my forehead. He locked eyes with me across the room, his gaze cold and challenging. "We must have the courage to prune the dead branches so the tree can thrive." Harrison continued, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "We cannot let mediocrity weigh down our ascent. Jordan knows this. He knows that to fly high you have to cut the dead weight, even if that weight shares your history." Slowly heads began to turn. It started with the table closest to me, then rippled outward until half the room was craning their necks to look at the guy in the faded hoodie sitting next to the kitchen door. I could feel their judgment like a physical weight. They saw a cautionary tale, a loser who had failed to launch. I did not shrink away. I did not look down at my plate. I simply picked up my spoon and took a calm, deliberate sip of the cold cucumber soup. It was under-seasoned. As Harrison concluded his speech with a toast to genetic superiority and financial dominance, I felt my phone buzz against my leg again. I glanced down under the tablecloth. My CFO had replied, "The valuation is complete, Ethan. Apex is bleeding cash. Their books are cooked. We can buy them for pennies on the dollar if we strike now." I wiped my mouth with the polyester napkin and looked up at Harrison, who was raising his glass to the cheering crowd. He was talking about pruning dead branches. He had no idea he was standing on a rotten limb, and I was the one holding the saw. The waiters began clearing the salad plates, replacing them with filet mignon for the main tables and rubbery chicken breast for table 19. From my vantage point in the shadows, I had a direct line of sight to the VIP table where the conversation had shifted from family platitudes to the only thing the King family actually cared about: money. A gray-haired man sitting next to Harrison leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. He was a hedge fund manager I recognized from the financial news, a man who usually smelled blood in the water before anyone else. "Harrison, I have been seeing some disturbing trends on the ticker," the man said, swirling his red wine. "Apex stock is down 12% this quarter, and there are rumors swirling about Helios Capital. They say the shark is circling the boat. If they launch a hostile bid, you are finished." Harrison stiffened his knife, screeching slightly against the china. He opened his mouth to defend his company, but Jordan cut him off. My future brother-in-law leaned back in his chair, draping an arm over the back of Lily's chair, enjoying the attention. "Let them circle," Jordan said loudly enough for half the room to hear. "The rumors are true, but you have the context wrong." Helios isn't trying to destroy us, they are trying to partner with us. I paused with a forkful of dry chicken halfway to my mouth. This was news to me considering I was the sole owner of Helios Capital and I had never spoken to Jordan about business in my life. In fact, Jordan continued looking smugly around the table. I had a private lunch with their senior acquisition representatives in Manhattan just last week. They are huge fans of my rebranding strategy. They think Apex has been held back by traditionalist thinking. The table went quiet, hanging on his every word. Even Harrison looked surprised, but he quickly masked it with a proud smile, happy to let his son spin the narrative. Really, the hedge fund manager asked, looking impressed. What are their terms? Jordan took a sip of wine, letting the suspense build. They want to modernize. Once the merger goes through, the current board is stepping back. Dad will move to an honorary chairman role, and Helios has tapped me to step up as global CEO. They want young, aggressive leadership. They said I am exactly the kind of visionary they have been looking for. Lily beamed, squeezing Jordan's arm, looking at him like he was a god. My fiancé, the CEO, she whispered loud enough for the table to hear. I set my fork down silently. The audacity was breathtaking. Jordan was not just lying, he was building a castle on a cloud. I pulled out my phone under the table. I opened the chat with my legal team. Update the acquisition terms, I typed. Clause 4B. Complete liquidation of existing executive management effective immediately upon closing. No golden parachutes, no retention bonuses, specific focus on the marketing director. I hit send and watched Jordan accept a round of congratulations from the table. He was toasting to a future that I had just deleted with a single text message. He thought he was the chosen one. He had no idea he was the target. The transition from dinner to the cocktail hour moved the guests to the outdoor terrace. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. I watched Jordan holding court near the open bar surrounded by his sycophants. He was gesturing wildly, clearly enjoying the sound of his own voice. I took a deep breath. It was time to test a theory. My forensic accountants had flagged a series of suspicious shell companies linked to the marketing department. I needed to see if Jordan would crack under pressure. I walked straight into the center of his circle. The laughter died down immediately as the group noticed the man in the hoodie had returned. Jordan rolled his eyes, ready to deliver another insult, but I spoke first. I have a question about the merger, Jordan. I said, keeping my voice loud enough to carry over the jazz music. I was reading the Financial Times this morning. They mentioned that Apex Solutions is currently under preliminary investigation by the IRS for tax fraud linked to vendor overbilling. If Helios Capital finds out about that during due diligence, won't it kill the deal? The silence that followed was absolute. For a split second, I saw pure terror in Jordan's eyes. I had hit the bullseye, but fear quickly turned into defensive rage. His face turned a deep shade of crimson. He slammed his crystal tumbler onto the marble bar top so hard that it shattered, sending shards of glass and expensive scotch flying everywhere. A woman nearby screamed. Before I could react, Jordan lunged at me. He grabbed the front of my hoodie with both hands, bunching the fabric tight against my throat. He was strong, fueled by adrenaline and panic. Who do you think you are? He screamed, his spit flying into my face. You come here to my party eating my food, and you dare to talk about things you do not understand. You are a nobody, Ethan. You are a leech. What do you know about billion-dollar deals? You have never seen $1,000 in your life unless you stole it. He shook me violently, pulling me off balance. His friend stepped back, looking nervous, but no one intervened. You are jealous, Jordan spat, pushing his face inches from mine. You are jealous because I am a king and you are a peasant. That investigation is a lie, fake news created by our enemies, and if you ever mention it again, I will bury you. Do you hear me? I will make sure you never work in this state again. Now get out of my sight. Go back to your slum before I have security drag you out by your hair. He shoved me backward. I stumbled but caught my footing. I straightened my hoodie and looked him dead in the eye. He was panting, his chest heaving. He thought he had just asserted dominance. He did not realize that by reacting with violence instead of a denial, he had just confirmed everything. I understand, Jordan, I said quietly. I will leave you to your business. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing amidst the broken glass. He was shaking. I pulled out my phone. confirm the IRS tip I texted my team, and add assault to the list of liabilities. The sound of shattering glass had barely faded when I saw my sister Lily marching across the terrace. For a fleeting second, I thought she was coming to check on me. I thought she was coming to apologize for her fiancé threatening to assault me in front of 50 witnesses. I was wrong. She did not look concerned. She looked furious. Her designer heels clicked aggressively against the stone pavers as she closed the distance between us. Before I could even open my mouth to explain what had happened, her hand connected hard with my cheek. The slap was sharp and stinging loud enough to make the guests nearby gasp again. I stood there, stunned, my hand instinctively rising to touch the burning skin. I looked at Lily. Her face was flushed, her eyes welling up with angry tears. "You are selfish, Ethan," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "You just cannot let me have one day, can you? You always have to make everything about you and your pathetic life." I stared at her in disbelief. "Lily, he just grabbed me by the throat," I said quietly. "He threatened me." "I do not care," Lily snapped, cutting me off. "You probably provoked him. You always do with your sulking and your judgment. Look at you, Ethan. You show up here in a dirty hoodie driving that embarrassing truck looking like a homeless person. Why could you not just pretend for once? Why could you not rent a suit and act like a successful human being just for tonight?" "I am who I am, Lily," I replied, feeling a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "I thought you invited me because I am your brother, not because you wanted a prop. I invited you because Mom made me promise on her deathbed that we would stay close." She spat out the words like poison. "But honestly, Ethan, you make it impossible. You are an anchor dragging me down. I am marrying into the King family. They are elite. They are winners. And you are standing here making me look like trash by association." She took a deep breath, smoothing out her dress, as if wiping away the contamination of my presence. "If you cannot behave, get out. Do not ruin my wedding next week. If you show up looking like this, I swear I will have security remove you myself." She turned on her heel and walked back toward Jordan, who was now being comforted by his mother as if he were the victim. I watched her go. The sting on my cheek faded, but the ache in my chest grew heavier. That was the moment the last thread connecting us snapped. I had come here hoping to save her from a family of vipers. I did not realize she had already become one of them. Before I could process the sting of my sister's rejection, a heavy hand landed on my shoulder. It was Harrison. He did not ask me to follow him. He simply gripped my shoulder and steered me away from the terrace toward the house. We bypassed the party and entered his private study, a room that smelled of stale cigar smoke and aggressive capitalism. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind us, cutting off the sound of the jazz band and the laughter. Harrison walked around his massive mahogany desk and sat down in a high-backed leather chair. He did not offer me a seat. He wanted me standing. He wanted me to feel small. He opened a drawer and slid a single sheet of paper across the polished wood surface. "We need to formalize some things," Ethan Harrison said, his voice devoid of the fake warmth he used in public. "Since you are going to be technically related to us by marriage, I need to make sure you understand your place. This family operates on assets, not liabilities. And let us be honest, son, you are a liability." I looked down at the document. It was not a welcome letter. It was a legal contract drafted by the Apex Solutions legal team. The terms were brutal. By signing this, I was agreeing to never solicit loans from the King family, never use their name for employment references, and most painfully, I was waiving all rights to my late parents' small house in the suburbs. "Lily wants to sell that house to pay for a vacation home in Cabo Harrison," explained, tapping the paper with a gold ring. "She says you are currently squatting there. This document ensures you will vacate the premises within 30 days of the wedding. We cannot have you dragging down her property value." I felt a cold rage spread through my chest. That house was the only thing our parents had left us. I had been maintaining it, paying the taxes, and keeping the garden alive while Lily was out chasing status. Now she was selling our childhood memories for a beach house. "You want me to sign away my home?" I asked, looking up at him. Harrison laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "It is not your home, Ethan. It is an asset. And assets belong to winners. Sign it." and you get to stay for the wedding and eat the free food. Refuse, and I will have the police escort you off the property for trespassing right now." I reached into the pocket of my hoodie and pulled out my pen. It was a Mont Blanc Meisterstück, varying from the standard model because it was custom-made with platinum inlays, a gift from the CEO of a Swiss bank I had acquired last year. Harrison sneered at it. "Cute pen. Did you buy that counterfeit on Canal Street? It almost looks real." I did not correct him. I uncapped the pen and pressed the nib to the paper. The ink flowed smoothly as I signed my name. To Harrison, I was signing away my dignity. In reality, I was signing his death warrant. By legally separating my finances from Lily and the Kings, I was ensuring that when I destroyed them, the fallout would not touch me. I slid the paper back to him. "Done," I said, capping the pen with a satisfying click. "You have nothing to worry about, Harrison. I promise I will never ask you for a single dime." Harrison smirked, tucking the paper into a folder. "Good choice. Now get back out there and try not to look so pathetic." I turned and walked toward the door. He thought he had just secured his son's future. He did not know he had just severed the only lifeline that could have saved them when the storm hit. I walked away from the mansion, leaving the sound of clinking glasses and hollow laughter behind me. The 2-mile walk back to the public beach parking lot felt different this time. The humidity had broken and the night air was sharp and clearing. I did not feel the humiliation Harrison intended for me to feel. Instead, I felt the cold clarity of a surgeon scrubbing in for an operation. They thought they had dismissed me, but they had actually just released me to do my work. When I finally reached my rusted Ford F-150 sitting alone under a flickering street lamp, I unlocked the door and climbed into the cab. To the outside world, the interior looked as worn as the exterior, with cracked leather seats and a dashboard covered in dust. But that was just camouflage. I reached under the steering column and pressed a hidden biometric scanner. The dashboard display transformed. The analog dials for the speedometer and fuel gauge faded away, replaced by high-resolution digital screens. A secure satellite uplink established a connection with my headquarters in Manhattan within seconds. The truck was not a scrap heap. It was a mobile command center equipped with military-grade encryption that I used to manage my multi-billion-dollar portfolio while staying off the grid. I put on my headset, and the voice of my chief financial officer filled my ear immediately. "We are ready on your mark, Ethan. The Asian markets are opening in 10 minutes. We can route the buy orders through Singapore to mask the origin." "Do it," I said, my voice steady. "Initiate Phase 1. I want aggressive accumulation. Buy every available share of Apex Solutions that hits the market. Do not worry about the price. Drive it up if you have to. I want 51% control before the New York Stock Exchange bell rings tomorrow morning." There was a brief pause on the line. 51% in a single night is going to trigger every alarm on Wall Street, Ethan. The SEC is going to be breathing down our necks. "Let them," I replied, watching the waves crash against the shore in the distance. "My legal team has the paperwork ready. This is a hostile takeover, but it is entirely legal. Apex is a public company and I am the public." I leaned back in the seat, watching the data streams scroll across the dashboard screens. Green numbers flickered rapidly, representing millions of dollars moving at the speed of light. While Jordan was drunk on champagne and Harrison was sleeping off his ego trip, I was dismantling their world brick by brick. "And there is one more thing," I added, my eyes narrowing as I recalled Harrison's speech about moral superiority. "Dig into the King Family Foundation, Harrison's private charity." "You think he is using it to evade taxes?" the CFO asked. "I think he is using it for much worse," I said. "He talks too much about pruning dead branches. I have a feeling that charity is where he buries the money he steals from the company. Audit it. Go back 10 years. Find every receipt, every donation, and every grant. If he bought a cup of coffee with charity money, I want to know about it. Understood? We will have the report by sunrise." I disconnected the call and watched the screen go dark, reverting to the old analog dashboard. I started the engine. The truck rumbled to life. The King family would wake up tomorrow thinking they were still royalty. They would not realize until the wedding that they were already my subjects. The hunt was on. 3 days later, the morning sun glinted off the Hudson River, creating a halo around the Statue of Liberty, visible from the first tee of the Liberty National Golf Club. This was one of the most exclusive patches of grass in America. Initiation fees hovered around $500,000, and the waiting list was a decade long. It was the kind of place where billionaires made deals to buy countries, not just companies. I stood on the tee box, adjusting my glove, enjoying the silence before the storm. I had spent the last 72 hours orchestrating the silent acquisition of Apex Solutions stock. We now held 49%, just shy of the controlling stake. Today was a victory lap. I pulled my driver from the bag, a custom-made Japanese prototype that cost more than my first car, and lined up my shot. As I began my backswing, the aggressive whine of an electric golf cart approaching at top speed broke my concentration. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. The loud performative laughter of Harrison King was unmistakable. I lowered the club and watched as two carts pulled up. Harrison and Jordan were in the first one, dressed in matching pastel polos that looked ridiculous against the rugged skyline. In the second cart sat two older men in serious gray suits. The investors they were desperate to impress. Harrison's eyes went wide when he saw me. He blinked rapidly, as if his brain was refusing to process the visual data. He stopped the cart abruptly, nearly throwing Jordan into the dashboard. Ethan, Harrison hissed, jumping out of the cart and marching toward me. His face was a mask of panic and rage. "What in God's name are you doing here? How did you get past the gate?" Jordan scrambled out after him, looking around nervously to see if the investors were watching. He looked at me, then at the water hazard to my left. "I know what this is," Jordan said, pointing a finger at me. "You climbed the fence, didn't you? You are diving for balls in the lake to sell them at the flea market. Jesus, Ethan, have you no shame? We have VIP clients here. If they see my future brother-in-law scavenging for golf balls like a raccoon, I will never hear the end of it." I leaned on my driver, looking at them with amusement. They were so blinded by their prejudice that they could not see the reality right in front of them. They did not notice that I was wearing a limited edition Peter Miller pullover. They did not notice that my bag was full of Hanma clubs. They only saw the narrative they had invented. "I am playing around Harrison," I said calmly. "Just like you." Playing Harrison scoffed, his face turning purple. "Around here costs more than your annual rent. Who did you bribe to let you on? Or did you steal a member's bag while they were in the clubhouse?" He turned to Jordan. "Call security. Tell them we have a trespasser. Tell them he is aggressive and possibly mentally unstable. I want him off this course in 5 minutes before Mr. Sterling sees him." Jordan pulled out his phone, a malicious grin spreading across his face. "With pleasure. This is going to be the highlight of my week. Watching you get dragged out of here in handcuffs for trespassing." I simply teed up my ball again. "Go ahead, call them," I said. "But you might want to ask Mr. Sterling why he is looking at me like he recognizes me first." Harrison froze, looking back at the investor in the second cart, who was squinting in my direction. The trap was set. They just didn't know they were the ones standing on the trap door. Jordan looked at the investor, Mr. Sterling, and then back at me. He saw an opportunity to turn a potential embarrassment into a spectacle. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick money clip, peeling off a stack of hundreds. "Tell you what," Ethan, Jordan said, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Since you are already trespassing, let's make this interesting. We are at the signature hole, par 3 over the water. If you can even hit the green from here, I will give you $100. But if you sink it in one stroke, I will give you $10,000 cash right now. That is more money than you make in a year, isn't it?" He tossed the stack of bills in his hand, taunting me. "But there is a catch," he continued. "When you miss, which you definitely will, you have to get on your knees and clean the mud off my Gucci loafers with your own shirt, in front of everyone. Do we have a deal, or are you going to run away?" I looked at the flag waving in the distance. It was about 170 yards, with a crosswind coming off the Hudson. Difficult for an amateur, but standard for someone who played scratch golf. "I accept," I said simply. Harrison snorted, covering his mouth to hide a laugh. Jordan pulled out his phone to record the humiliation. Even the investors looked uncomfortable but curious. I did not take a practice swing. I did not check the wind again. I just stepped up, addressed the ball, and let my muscle memory take over. The sound of the club face striking the ball was pure and crisp, a sharp crack that echoed over the water. The ball soared in a high arc, cutting through the wind perfectly. It landed soft on the green 10 feet past the hole, and the backspin took over. We all watched in silence as the white speck rolled backward, tracking the line like it was on a rail. It dropped into the cup with a satisfying rattle that we could hear even from the tee box. For 3 seconds there was absolute silence. Then Mr. Sterling started clapping. "That was magnificent," he said. "I have not seen a shot like that since the Masters." Jordan's face drained of color. He looked from the hole to me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The phone in his hand lowered slowly. He had just lost a bet he thought was impossible to lose. "Pay the man," Jordan Harrison muttered, realizing that welching on a bet in front of investors would look worse than losing one. Jordan's face turned a violent shade of purple. He threw the stack of bills onto the grass at my feet. The wind caught a few, scattering them like leaves. "Pick it up," he spat, his voice shaking with rage. "You got lucky, you piece of trash. Pick it up and get out of here before I change my mind." I looked down at the money. $10,000. A fortune to the Ethan they thought they knew. But to me, it was pocket change. I did not bend down. I stepped over the money, my boots crunching on the gravel. "Keep it, Jordan," I said, walking past him toward the exit. He blinked, confused. "What? You should save it," I said, looking back over my shoulder. "You are going to need a retainer for a very expensive criminal defense attorney very soon." I walked away, leaving him standing there amidst the scattered bills. He thought I was crazy. He did not know that I had just given him the best financial advice of his life. 2 days before the wedding, I decided it was time to upgrade my transportation. As much as I loved my truck, I knew that arriving at the church in a rusted Ford F-150 would give Harrison and Jordan exactly the ammunition they wanted to humiliate me again. I needed armor. I needed a weapon made of steel and leather. I pulled into the parking lot of the most exclusive luxury auto mall in the Hamptons, intending to buy something understated but expensive. I walked into the Bentley showroom first. The air inside was crisp and smelled of expensive cologne and new tires. I was admiring a Continental GT when a screeching voice shattered the peace. I said, "I want the interior in cream, not white." "Are you deaf?" I froze. I knew that voice. I looked toward the back of the showroom and saw Alicia King standing next to a terrified salesman. Beside her was my sister Lily, looking bored and scrolling through her phone. They were picking out the getaway car for the wedding. Before I could turn around and leave, Alicia spotted me. Her eyes widened in outrage and she marched over her heels, clicking sharply on the tile. "Are you stalking us now, Ethan?" She did not lower her voice. Everyone in the showroom turned to look. "I told Harrison you were obsessed with our money, but this is psychotic. What are you doing here? Trying to beg for a ride to the wedding so you do not have to walk again." "I am just looking for a car, Alicia," I said calmly. Alicia let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "Looking. You cannot afford the air and the tires of these cars." She turned to the showroom manager who was rushing over. "Excuse me," she demanded, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. "This man is bothering us. He is a vagrant, and I believe he is scouting the place to steal hubcaps or accessories. I am spending a fortune here, and I refuse to do business in a place that lets riffraff wander in off the street. Remove him, or I take my business elsewhere." The manager looked at Alicia's designer dress, and then at my hoodie. The calculation took him less than a second. "Sir, I am going to have to ask you to leave," he said, stepping into my personal space. "This is a private dealership for serious buyers only." I looked past him at Lily. She heard everything. She saw her future mother-in-law treating her brother like a criminal. But she just stood there examining her fingernails, pretending I did not exist. That silence was louder than Alicia's shouting. "Fine," I said. "I will go." I walked out of the Bentley dealership without a fight. I crossed the street directly to the Rolls-Royce showroom opposite them. The salesman there was an older man who had seen enough eccentrics to know not to judge a book by its cover. He greeted me with a nod. "I want that one," I said, pointing to the Phantom in the center of the room. "The black one." "Excellent choice, sir. Would you like to discuss financing options?" "No." I pulled out my black card, the one made of anodized titanium. Full payment via immediate wire transfer. But I have one condition. Do not give me the keys today. I want you to deliver it to the front steps of the St. Jude Cathedral on Saturday, exactly 10 minutes before the wedding ceremony begins. Park it right in front of the Bentley my sister is renting. The salesman smiled, realizing he had just made the easiest commission of his life. Consider it done, sir. I looked back across the street through the glass window. Alicia was still screaming at the Bentley staff. She thought she had won. She did not know that I had just bought the ultimate status symbol just to park it next to her rental. The following morning, I sat in the driver's seat of my truck, parked 3 blocks away from the Apex Solutions headquarters. The dashboard screens were live streaming the interior of the executive suite, thanks to the security access codes my tech team had acquired overnight. I watched Harrison King sitting in his plush leather chair, admiring his reflection in a framed award on his desk. He looked comfortable. That was about to change. I typed a command on my laptop and hit enter. At exactly 9 o'clock, a high-priority email landed in Harrison's inbox. The subject line was simple: Immediate Personnel Efficiency Audit. On the screen, I saw Harrison frown as the notification pinged. He opened the email. I could practically see the color drain from his face as he read the mandate from Helios Capital. We were demanding a 20% reduction in operational overhead before the merger could proceed. It was a test of leadership and integrity. Harrison failed immediately. He did not look at his own bloated expense account. He did not consider cutting his son's unnecessary marketing budget. Instead, he hit the intercom button. "Mrs. Higgins, get in here. Now." Mrs. Higgins walked into the office. She was a sweet woman in her 60s who had been Harrison executive assistant for 20 years. She knew his schedule better than he did, and she had covered for his mistakes more times than I could count. She looked worried, clutching a notepad. "Yes, Mr. King, is everything all right?" she asked. Harrison stood up, avoiding eye contact. He picked up a random stack of files from his desk. "I was reviewing the quarterly reports you typed up. There is a formatting error on page 7. The margins are off by a fraction of an inch." Mrs. Higgins looked confused. "Sir, I can fix that in 2 minutes. The printer settings sometimes shift." "It is not about the printer." Harrison snapped, his voice rising. "It is about attention to detail. We are merging with a global firm, Mrs. Higgins. They demand perfection. Your performance has been slipping lately. You are slow, you are forgetful, and quite frankly, you are becoming a liability." The woman stared at him in shock. "Mr. King, I have never missed a deadline. I worked through Christmas last year to help you close the deal with the Japanese investors, and you were compensated for it." Harrison cut her off cold and heartless. "But today is a new day. I have to make tough decisions to save this company. I am terminating your employment effective immediately. Security will escort you out." Mrs. Higgins began to cry, her hands trembling. "Please, sir, my husband is starting chemotherapy next week. I need the health insurance. You know I need this job." Harrison sat back down and opened his laptop, signaling the conversation was over. "That is not my problem. The company needs to be lean. Now please leave before I call the guards." I watched Mrs. Higgins walk out of the room, sobbing, broken by the man she had served faithfully for 2 decades. Harrison waited until the door closed, then let out a sigh of relief. He muttered to himself, "That should save 60 grand on the books." He thought he was being a ruthless businessman. He thought he was saving his own skin. He had no idea that I was watching every second of it. I picked up my secure phone. "Get HR on the line," I said. "Find Mrs. Higgins' contact info. Prepare a job offer for her as the executive assistant to the new CEO of Apex. Double her salary and give her a signing bonus that covers her husband's medical bills. And make sure Harrison King's severance package is adjusted to 0. He just fired the only person who knew how to save him." The rehearsal dinner was held at the Obsidian Room, a French restaurant in downtown Manhattan, where the tasting menu cost more than the average monthly mortgage payment. I arrived 5 minutes early wearing a simple charcoal suit I had picked up from a department store. It was not the bespoke tuxedo waiting in my truck, but it was respectful. I wanted to give my sister one last chance to do the right thing. I wanted to see if she would make room for me at the table before I burned the table down. I approached the heavy velvet ropes guarding the entrance. The maitre d' stood behind a podium checking a tablet with the intensity of a border patrol agent. Name, he asked, without looking up. Ethan. I am the bride's brother. He swiped a finger down the screen. Then he swiped again. He frowned and looked up at me. I am sorry, sir. Your name is not on the guest list for the private dining room. The King family has reserved the entire space, and they were very specific about the head count. There must be a mistake, I said, keeping my voice calm. My sister is the bride. Before the man could respond, the double doors swung open and Jordan stepped out. He was holding a glass of cognac, swirling it slowly. He did not look surprised to see me. He looked bored. There is no mistake, Ethan, Jordan said, leaning against the doorframe. We have important investors in there. The CEO of a Japanese tech firm is sitting next to Lily. We cannot have you in there making small talk about your truck or your pathetic life. It ruins the ambiance. He took a sip of his drink, enjoying the moment. Besides, we ran out of seats. The table only seats 20 and you are number 21. Math is not your strong suit, but even you can understand that you do not fit. So I am uninvited to the rehearsal dinner too, I asked, staring him down. Jordan laughed, shaking his head. No, do not be dramatic. We are family, right? You can wait out here in the hallway. There is a nice bench near the coat check. He turned to the maitre d' and snapped his fingers. Jacques, bring my brother-in-law a box of the leftovers from the appetizers. The cold shrimp and the bread rolls that people did not touch. Pack it up for him so he has something to eat while he waits for us to finish. The maitre d' looked uncomfortable but nodded. Yes, Mr. King. Jordan turned back to me, a smirk plastered on his face. See, Ethan. I am generous. I am feeding you. Just sit quietly on the bench and do not make eye contact with anyone important who walks by. We will let you know when we are done, so you can drive Lily back to the hotel. We hired you as the designated driver, remember? He turned his back on me and walked back into the warmth of the restaurant. The heavy doors swung shut, sealing in the laughter and the clinking of crystal. I stood in the cold, drafty hallway, smelling the faint scent of truffle oil seeping from the kitchen. Jacques returned a moment later with a white styrofoam box. I am very sorry, sir, he whispered, handing it to me. I took the box. It was light. Cold shrimp and stale bread. I walked over to the bench near the coat check and sat down. I placed the box on my lap, but I did not open it. I pulled out my phone. Execute the final phase, I typed to my legal team, and add the Obsidian Room to the acquisition list. I want to own the building this restaurant rents from by tomorrow morning. I sat alone in the hallway listening to the muffled sounds of the party I was paying for. Jordan thought he had banished me to the sidelines. He did not realize that from this bench, I was about to evict him from his own life. I sat on the velvet bench for another 20 minutes, staring at the unopened styrofoam box of cold shrimp. I could hear the muffled applause from the private dining room. They were probably toasting to Jordan's genius right now. The double doors swung open again, but this time it was not a waiter. It was Jordan heading toward the restrooms. He stopped when he saw me still sitting there obediently. Still here, he asked with a smirk. You really are like a stray dog. You stay right where you are told, hoping for scraps. I stood up slowly, reaching into the pocket of my jacket. I ignored his insult. I had one final test for him. A test of character. I know I am not welcome inside, Jordan, I said, keeping my voice low. But I wanted to give you this. It is a wedding gift. I thought it would be better to give it to you privately since it is vintage. Jordan looked at the small rectangular box wrapped in simple brown paper. He raised an eyebrow, suspicious but curious. He snatched it from my hand without saying thank you. Let us see what the pauper can afford, he muttered, tearing the paper off. He flipped open the velvet box. Inside sat a watch. It was not a massive diamond-encrusted monstrosity, like the one currently cutting off the circulation on his wrist. It was a Patek Philippe reference 2499 in platinum. To the untrained eye, it looked like a simple old watch with a leather strap and a slightly faded dial. To a connoisseur, it was a masterpiece worth $250,000. Jordan stared at it for a second, then burst out laughing. You are joking, right? He asked, holding the watch up by the strap as if it were a dead rat. Look at this thing. The leather is worn, the face is yellowing. Did you buy this at a flea market? Or did you steal it from a nursing home? It is a classic, Jordan, I said quietly. It is about heritage. Heritage, Jordan scoffed. It is junk. It does not even have a battery. This is exactly what I mean about you, Ethan. You have no taste. You think old garbage is valuable just because it is old. I would not be caught dead wearing this. It looks like something you buy for $50 on a folding table in Chinatown. He shook his head, and then did something that made my blood run cold. He walked over to the decorative brass trash can near the coat check and dropped the watch inside. Clang. The sound of platinum hitting metal echoed in the hallway. Do yourself a favor and leave it there, Jordan said, wiping his hands on his pants. I do not want your bad luck rubbing off on me. Buy me a toaster next time. At least that is useful. He turned and walked into the restroom whistling. I walked over to the trash can. I reached in and gently retrieved the watch. I wiped a speck of dust from the crystal face. It was unharmed. I carefully placed it back in my pocket. You should have kept it, Jordan, I whispered to the empty hallway. That watch is worth $200,000. You are going to need exactly that amount for your bail money next week. I picked up the box of leftovers and dropped it into the trash can, replacing the watch. I had seen enough. There was no humanity left in him to save. It was time to take everything. The rehearsal dinner was winding down when Lily finally came out to the hallway. She did not look happy to see me still sitting there. She grabbed my arm and pulled me into a secluded alcove near the restrooms, away from the prying eyes of her new family. I thought for a moment she was going to apologize for the way I had been treated. I was wrong. Ethan, I need you to transfer the rest of Mom and Dad's estate money to my account tonight, she said without preamble. I stared at her. That money was the last thing our parents left us. It was supposed to be for emergencies or for a down payment on a house. It was not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but it was sacred. Lily. That is the rainy day fund, I said slowly. Why do you need $40,000 at 10 o'clock at night? She rolled her eyes, letting out an exasperated sigh. Because I need a specific necklace for the ceremony. Alicia made a comment about my neck looking bare, and I found this vintage sapphire piece that matches the theme perfectly. It costs $45,000. I need the money, Ethan. You want to spend Mom and Dad's life savings on a necklace? I asked, my voice quiet. Lily, that money took them 30 years to save. Dad worked double shifts for that. So what? She snapped. They are dead, Ethan. They do not care about money anymore. And honestly, what are you going to do with it? You are single. You have no wife, no kids. And let's be real, looking at you probably never will. You live in a truck. You do not have expenses. She poked me in the chest with a manicured finger. I am marrying into the King family. I have a future to build. I need to look the part. If I show up wearing cheap jewelry, they will judge me. Do you want me to be embarrassed? Give me the money so I can make this family proud. I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. I searched for the little girl who used to scrape her knees and cry for me to carry her home. She was gone. In her place was a woman who would cannibalize her own history to feed her vanity. I took a step back, removing her hand from my chest. You are right, Lily, I said, coldness settling in my chest. You have a future to build. I pulled out my phone. But I did not open the banking app to transfer the funds. I opened the administrative portal for the trust. With 3 taps, I changed the status of the joint account to frozen pending audit. I will take care of it, I said, lying to her for the first time in my life. Go back to your party. She smiled, a predatory, victorious smile. Thank you, Ethan. I knew you would be useful eventually. She turned and walked back toward the laughter. She did not receive a transfer notification. Instead, 5 minutes later, she would receive an alert that the account was locked due to suspicious activity. She had just asked for the last drop of blood I had to give. Now she would get nothing. The rehearsal dinner finally ended, and the guests retreated to their hotel suites. But the night was far from over for the King men. I sat in the cab of my truck parked in the shadows of the resort lot and adjusted the volume on my headset. Earlier that evening, when Harrison had forced me into his study to sign that humiliating contract, I had done more than just use my own pen. I had slid a micro transmitter the size of a grain of rice under the lip of his mahogany desk. Now that bug was broadcasting live audio directly to my ears. I heard the heavy oak door of the study slam shut. Then came the sound of a lock clicking into place. "Are you sure this is safe, Dad?" It was Jordan, voice nervous but eager. "Stop pacing and sit down," Harrison snapped. "The room is soundproof. I had it built that way. Now listen to me closely. The Helios deal is going to close in 48 hours. Once they take over, we lose control of the accounts. So what is the plan?" Jordan asked. "The plan is, we take our severance package early," Harrison said. I heard the sound of a safe keypad beeping, followed by the rustle of papers. "I have set up a wire transfer for tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp. It is categorized as a vendor payment for a consulting firm in the Cayman Islands." "How much?" Jordan asked, his voice dropping to a greedy whisper. $5 million, Harrison replied. "It is everything left in the operational reserve. By the time Helios auditors figure out the consulting firm is fake, we will be untouchable. I have already bought the tickets. After the wedding, we are not going on a honeymoon. We are going non-extradition." I listened as my own breathing slowed. They were not just bad businessmen, they were thieves. They were planning to gut the company, leaving hundreds of employees without paychecks just to line their own pockets before running away. "But what about the wedding?" Jordan asked. "If we drain the accounts tomorrow, will the checks for the vendors clear? Who cares?" Harrison scoffed. "Let them bounce. By the time the florist and the caterer realize they have been stiffed, we will be sipping Mai Tais on a private beach. This is survival of the fittest, son. We take what is ours, and we leave the scraps for the losers. Like your brother-in-law." I reached out and pressed a button on my dashboard. The recording saved instantly uploaded to 3 secure cloud servers. I had them. This was no longer just a hostile takeover, it was now a criminal investigation. I took the liberty of adding a flag to the transfer request. Harrison continued, oblivious to the fact that he was confessing to a federal crime. "It requires dual authorization. I have already signed. I need you to log in with your credentials and approve the second half. Do it now." I heard the tapping of keys on a laptop. "Done," Jordan said. $5 million ready to fly. "We are going to be rich, Dad." "Rich is an understatement," Harrison laughed. "We are going to be kings." I took off the headset and stared at the dark resort in the distance. They thought they were kings. They did not realize they had just abdicated the throne. Tomorrow morning, when they tried to push that button, they would find out that the bank was already under new management. Mine. The recording light on my dashboard faded to black. I had the smoking gun evidence I needed. I stepped out of the truck to secure the locking mechanism on the toolbox where the hard drive backup was stored. The parking lot was deserted, illuminated only by a few flickering halogen lights that buzzed in the humid night air. I turned to get back into the driver's seat when a shadow detached itself from the side of a black Escalade parked 2 spots over. It was Jordan. He had followed me. He was not walking with his usual arrogant strut. He was prowling. The adrenaline of plotting a multi-million-dollar heist had clearly put him on edge. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, and his tie was loosened around his neck. He looked like a man who is either about to conquer the world or vomit from anxiety. He moved quickly, slamming his hand against the door of my truck, preventing me from opening it. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and fear. "I saw you walking near the study earlier," Jordan hissed. "I saw you looking at the door. You were listening, weren't you?" I kept my body language relaxed, leaning back against the rusted metal of my fender. "I do not know what you are talking about, Jordan. I was just leaving." "Do not lie to me," he spat, stepping closer until his nose was almost touching mine. "You are always lurking around, Ethan, like a rat in the walls. You think you are clever because you stay quiet, but I know you are plotting something. You are jealous. You want what I have." He looked around the empty parking lot, checking to make sure we were truly alone. Then he lowered his voice to a menacing growl. "Let me make something very clear to you. I have a 9mm in the glove box of that car right there. It is unregistered. If I wanted to, I could put a bullet in you right now and claim you tried to mug me. Who would the police believe? The VP of Apex Solutions? Or the unemployed loser in a pickup truck? He poked a finger hard into my chest. So, if you heard anything tonight, anything at all about transfers or accounts or travel plans, you bury it, you forget it. Because if you breathe a word of my business to anyone, I will not just sue you. I will end you. Do you understand me? I looked down at his finger on my chest, then up into his manic eyes. He was trembling, not from power, but from cowardice. He was a man trying to convince himself he was dangerous. I slowly reached up and removed his hand from my chest. His grip was weak. You seem very nervous for a man who just won the lottery, Jordan. I said, my voice steady and calm. I am not nervous. I am lethal, he countered, trying to sound tough, but his voice cracked slightly. I stepped around him, opening my truck door. I looked him dead in the eye one last time. Put the gun away, Jordan. You are going to hurt yourself. And do not worry about me talking. I do not need to say a single word to anyone. I climbed into the cab and started the engine. I will let the law do the talking for me. Jordan stood there confused by my confidence, watching as I backed out. He yelled something after me, but the sound was drowned out by the rumble of my engine. He thought he had intimidated me. He did not know that the only weapon he needed to fear was the recording sitting on the passenger seat beside me. The morning of the wedding arrived with a heavy gray mist rolling off the ocean. I had checked into a budget motel 3 miles from the resort, having been denied a room at the venue. As I unzipped the garment bag hanging on the back of the bathroom door, I expected to see the charcoal suit I had purchased yesterday. Instead, I was greeted by the smell of chemical fumes. The suit was destroyed. Someone had slashed the fabric and doused it in bright red paint. It looked like a crime scene. Pinned to the lapel was a note scrawled in handwriting I recognized immediately. Style upgrade courtesy of the groom. Try not to embarrass us too much. Jordan wanted me to show up in my stained hoodie. He wanted his wealthy guests to see the contrast between his Armani elegance and my poverty. He wanted a court jester. I stared at the ruined fabric and felt a cold smile tug at the corner of my mouth. He was playing checkers while I was playing three-dimensional chess. He thought he had destroyed my only option. He did not know that the charcoal suit was just a decoy. I left the ruined heap on the motel floor and walked out to my truck. The air was thick with humidity, but inside the cab the climate control was set to a crisp 68 degrees. I placed my thumb on the biometric scanner on the passenger side panel. A hidden compartment slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, protected by a vacuum-sealed bag, was a midnight blue tuxedo, cut from Italian wool and silk. It was a Tom Ford bespoke piece, tailored in Milan, specifically for the black tie gala I had hosted at the Met last year. I pulled it out carefully. The fabric shimmered slightly in the cabin light. Beside it lay a pair of Oxfords polished to a mirror shine and a set of platinum cufflinks engraved with the Helios capital crest. I dressed inside the spacious cab of the truck, transforming from the downtrodden brother-in-law into the shark that ate Wall Street. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. The fit was perfection. The lines were sharp enough to cut glass. I fastened the cufflinks and adjusted the silk bow tie. Jordan wanted a spectacle. He wanted to see a man broken by circumstance. Instead, he was about to meet the man who owned his future. I picked up my phone and sent one final message to my security team. The package is secure. Meet me at the church steps in 20 minutes. I started the engine. It was time to go to the wedding. 1 hour before the ceremony, the groom's suite at the Sapphire Cove Resort was a hive of frantic activity. Photographers were snapping candid shots of Jordan and his groomsmen, pretending to laugh while drinking aged scotch. In the corner, Harrison King stood alone, adjusting his silk ascot in a gilded mirror. He looked like a man on top of the world. He was the father of the groom, the vice president of a company about to be acquired, and in his mind, a soon-to-be fugitive with $5 million in his pocket. He checked his gold pocket watch. It was almost time. By now, the wire transfer to the Cayman Islands account should have cleared. He pulled his encrypted smartphone from his inner jacket pocket, expecting to see a green confirmation checkmark from the offshore bank. Instead, he saw a flashing red icon. Notification from Cayman Trust. Transaction ID 904. Status failed. Account code red. Assets frozen pending regulatory review. Harrison stared at the screen. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking pale and waxy under the vanity lights. He blinked rapidly, thinking he had misread it. He tapped the screen furiously, trying to refresh the app. Service unavailable. Please contact the Department of Justice. He almost dropped the phone. The Department of Justice. That was impossible. He had set up that account through 3 layers of shell companies. Even the best forensic accountants would need months to untangle that web. How could it be frozen in less than 12 hours? He felt a bead of cold sweat trickle down his spine, ruining his expensive shirt. He looked around the room. Jordan was busy toasting with his friends, completely oblivious. Harrison forced a smile, but it felt like a grimace. It had to be a glitch. It had to be a system error. Maybe the bank server was down due to a tropical storm. Maybe he had typed the password wrong in his haste last night. He tried to dial his private banker in Georgetown. The call went straight to a generic voicemail. Damn it, Harrison hissed under his breath, shoving the phone back into his pocket. Is everything okay, Dad? Jordan called out, noticing his father's sudden change in demeanor. You look like you have seen a ghost. Harrison straightened up, smoothing his jacket with trembling hands. Everything is fine, son. Just a minor issue with the catering. They tried to substitute the caviar. I handled it. He lied easily. He had been lying his whole life. He told himself to calm down. The Helios deal was the real prize. Even if the $5 million was stuck for a few days, the buyout money would flood in by Monday. He was Harrison King. He was untouchable. He grabbed a glass of scotch and downed it in one gulp. The burn in his throat distracted him from the gnawing pit of dread in his stomach. He checked his reflection one last time. He looked powerful. He looked rich. He did not look like a man whose entire financial existence had just been deleted by a ghost in the machine. Let us go get you married, he said, clapping Jordan on the shoulder. He walked out of the suite, leaving the warning on his phone unheeded. He was marching toward the altar, convinced he was the king of the castle. He did not know he was walking straight into the guillotine. The atmosphere outside the St. Jude Cathedral was electric, but for all the wrong reasons. Guests were arriving in droves, their designer outfits competing for attention, while the paparazzi hired by Jordan snapped photos from behind the velvet ropes. I sat in my truck a block away watching the live feed from the security cameras I had hacked into. I saw Harrison pacing near the entrance, his face still pale from the banking notification. He looked like a man standing on a trapdoor waiting for the lever to pull. Then the distraction arrived. A sleek black motorcycle courier with the Helios Capital logo emblazoned on the side roared up to the curb. The rider dismounted and walked straight to Harrison, bypassing the security detail. He handed over a thick envelope made of heavy cream cardstock sealed with red wax. I watched Harrison's hands tremble as he broke the seal. He pulled out the letter and read it. His expression transformed instantly from terror to euphoric relief. He grabbed Jordan by the shoulders and shook him. He is coming! Harrison shouted, his voice cracking with excitement. The chairman, the actual owner of Helios Capital, he is coming to the wedding. Jordan's eyes went wide. Are you serious? The mystery billionaire. Harrison waved the letter in the air like a winning lottery ticket. Read it. He is arriving in 20 minutes to personally oversee the transition of power. He wants to make a public announcement during the ceremony. This is it, son. He is coming to crown us. He probably heard about the banking glitch and is coming to hand-deliver the check. The panic that had gripped the King family evaporated instantly, replaced by a manic energy. Alicia began barking orders at the wedding planner. Get the red carpet rolled out to the street, she screamed. Move the floral arrangements. I want a path cleared straight to the altar. And tell the ushers to move the cousins from the 3rd row back to the balcony. We need the front row empty for the chairman and his entourage. I watched them scramble. It was pathetic and hilarious. They were cleaning the house for the executioner. They were pushing their own family members into the nosebleed seats to make room for the man they had spent the last week spitting on. Harrison was practically skipping. "This is huge," he told the gathered groomsmen. "Act professional. Stand up straight. We are about to be the most powerful family in New York." I checked my watch. It was time. I turned off the monitor and stepped out of the truck. The Tom Ford tuxedo fit like a second skin. I adjusted my cuffs and walked toward the church. They were expecting a savior in a limousine. They were about to get a nemesis on foot. They were rolling out the red carpet for me, and they did not even know it. The stage was set for the greatest reveal of their lives, and I was going to enjoy every second of their shock. I ascended the granite steps of the St. Jude Cathedral, moving with the easy confidence of a man who owned the building. The security team I had stationed at the perimeter recognized me instantly. They gave me subtle, imperceptible nods and parted the velvet ropes to let me pass. To anyone else, it looked like they were just being polite to a guest. To me, it was the first sign that the coup was underway. But Alicia King did not see the nods. She only saw her unwanted son-in-law walking up the red carpet she had just screamed at the staff to vacuum. She was standing near the massive oak doors, checking her makeup in a compact mirror, ensuring she looked perfect for the arrival of the Helios chairman. When she saw me, her jaw actually dropped. She marched down 3 steps to intercept me, blocking my path to the sanctuary. Her eyes raked over my Tom Ford tuxedo. She looked for a loose thread, a poor fit, or a rental tag. She found nothing. The suit was flawless, tailored to within a millimeter of my life. But in her mind, it was impossible for Ethan the truck driver to look like James Bond. Therefore, it had to be a trick. "Did you rob a bank on your way here, Ethan?" Alicia hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Or did you max out a credit card you have no intention of paying?" I smoothed my lapel. "I just wanted to dress appropriate for the occasion, Alicia. It is a big day for the family." "Do not talk to me about family," she snapped. "You are playing dress-up. You think because you put on expensive fabric you are one of us. You are not. You are a fraud. You probably rented this for 24 hours, and you will return it tomorrow smelling like sweat and failure." She looked around to make sure the other guests were already inside. Then she did something that stripped away every layer of sophistication she pretended to have. She looked down at my shoes, hand-polished Italian leather, worth more than her first car. She pursed her lips and spat. A glob of saliva landed right on the toe of my left shoe, glistening against the black polish. "It does not matter what you wear, Ethan," she said, staring into my eyes with pure hatred. "You could wrap a garbage can in silk, but it is still full of trash. That is what you are. Trash. Now get out of my way. The chairman of Helios Capital is arriving any minute, and I do not want him to see me standing next to a lottery winner wannabe." I looked down at the spit on my shoe. I did not wipe it off. I wanted to remember this moment. I wanted to remember exactly how small she made me feel, so I would feel no guilt when I took everything she had. I stepped around her, carefully avoiding touching her. "You are right, Alicia," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "The chairman is arriving any minute. You should definitely be ready." I walked through the cathedral doors, leaving her standing on the steps, wiping her mouth. She was so busy waiting for a god to arrive, she did not realize she had just spit on his shoes. I walked past the flurry of bridesmaids in pastel pink dresses who were too busy fixing their makeup to stop me. I pushed open the double doors to the private bridal suite, finding my sister alone for the first time that day. Lily stood on a velvet pedestal, surrounded by mirrors, adjusting the train of her $20,000 Vera Wang gown. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale, but the moment she saw my reflection in the glass, the fantasy shattered. "Get out, Ethan," she snapped, not even turning around. "I told you I do not want your bad energy in here." "And where did you get that suit? Did you spend your entire life savings on a rental just to try and upstage the groom?" It is pathetic. I closed the door behind me and locked it. I walked toward her, stopping just outside the circle of her dress train. "I am not here to fight Lily," I said, my voice low and urgent. "I am here to save you. You need to call this off. Right now. You need to take off of that dress, walk out the back door, and get in my truck." Lily turned around slowly, a look of pure incredulity on her face. She let out a sharp, cruel laugh that echoed off the high ceiling. "Save me," she repeated. "Save me from what? From a life of luxury, from private jets and penthouses. You have lost your mind. You are so jealous that I am finally escaping our mediocre background that you are making up stories. It is not a story, Lily, I said, stepping closer. Harrison and Jordan are not businessmen. They are criminals. I have seen the books. They have been embezzling money from Apex Solutions for years. They are bankrupting the company to fund this lifestyle. The FBI is outside right now waiting for the ceremony to start so they can arrest them. If you marry Jordan, you become an accessory. They will freeze your assets. They will drag you down with them. Lily stared at me for a long moment. I thought I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. I thought the sister I used to know was waking up. But then her expression hardened into something cold and unrecognizable. You are lying, she spat. And even if you are not, I do not care. I froze. You do not care that they are thieves? I care that they are winners. Lily screamed, her hands balling into fists. I care that they have power. Something you will never understand. Jordan treats me like a queen. And you want me to give that up to go back to being a nobody? To go back to pinching pennies and living in a small house? No, I would rather be a rich criminal wife than a poor loser sister. She reached for the intercom on the wall. I am calling security, she hissed. If you do not leave right now, I will have you thrown out into the street. Do not ruin this for me, Ethan. I mean it. You are dead to me. I looked at her one last time. The sister I loved was gone, consumed by the very greed that was about to destroy her new family. I understand, I said quietly. I just wanted to give you a choice. But you have made it. I unlocked the door and stepped back into the hallway. Goodbye, Lily. I walked away as she started screaming at her bridesmaids to fix her hair. She was worried about a stray curl. She should have been worried about the handcuffs waiting for her at the altar. I had done my duty. Now I could watch the fire burn without guilt. I walked away from the bridal suite, leaving my sister to her delusions of grandeur. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, severing the final tie to my past. I did not head toward the main sanctuary where the organ music was already swelling. Instead, I turned left down a narrow service corridor lined with dusty portraits of old saints. They seemed to be watching me silently, judging the vengeance I was about to unleash. I did not care. The time for mercy had passed. I pushed open the heavy steel exit door at the back of the cathedral and stepped out into the bright, harsh sunlight of the alleyway. The contrast between the soft, perfumed air inside and the grit of the city outside was jarring. But what waited for me in that alley was beautiful in its own terrifying way. 6 black government SUVs were idling in a perfect line, their engines humming with a low, menacing growl. Standing beside them was a small army. On one side stood a tactical team from the FBI, their windbreakers snapping in the wind, faces grim and ready. On the other side stood my legal team, a phalanx of sharks in $3,000 suits, clutching leather briefcases that contained the death warrants of the King family empire. My lead counsel, a man named Sterling, who had dismantled corporations twice the size of Apex Solutions, stepped forward. He did not smile. He handed me a thin tablet, displaying a live countdown. "We are green across the board," Ethan Sterling said, his voice clipping with efficiency. "The SEC has flagged the trading accounts. The Cayman authorities have frozen the offshore assets. And the federal warrants for Harrison and Jordan King have just been digitally signed by the judge. We are ready to execute on your command." I looked at the screen. The stock price of Apex was already plummeting in the after-hours market as news of the investigation leaked. I looked at the FBI agents who were checking their earpieces. Inside that church, Harrison and Jordan were standing at the altar thinking they were gods. They were about to find out they were just mortals, standing in the path of a hurricane. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of exhaust and ozone. I adjusted my silk bow tie one last time, ensuring it was perfectly straight. I checked the Patek Philippe watch in my pocket, the one Jordan had thrown in the trash. It was time. "Give them 2 minutes," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I want them to start the vows. I want them to get to the part where they promise to be together for richer or for poorer. Because the irony is going to be delicious." I turned back towards the steel door. My shadow stretched long against the brick wall. "Let us go," I said, signaling the team. "It is showtime." The agents moved into formation behind me. The lawyers fell into step. We were not wedding guests. We were the reckoning. I pulled the door open and the sound of the wedding march spilled out. I stepped into the darkness of the church, ready to step into the light of my victory. The organ music faded into a reverent silence, leaving only the sound of muffled coughing and the rustle of expensive silk. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting the congregation in hues of ruby and gold. At the altar, Jordan stood tall, puffed up with unearned pride next to Lily, who looked radiant but hollow. Harrison and Alicia sat in the front row, beaming like monarchs surveying their kingdom. They believed they had won. They believed the past was buried and the future was theirs to spend. The priest, a man with a voice like gravel, cleared his throat and looked out over the crowd. He reached the pivotal moment of the ceremony, the moment that is usually just a formality in high society weddings. If anyone here has just cause why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of people who knew secrets but refused to speak them. Harrison smirked, slightly confident that he had bought everyone's loyalty or silenced their opposition. He started to turn his head back to the altar, ready for the vows to proceed. But before the priest could take a breath, I stepped out from the shadows of the vestibule. I did not run, I did not shout. I simply began to walk down the center aisle. The sound of my hand-polished Oxford striking the marble floor was rhythmic and deliberate. Click, click, click. It cut through the silence like a metronome counting down to an explosion. Heads began to turn. At first there was confusion. The guests in the back rows squinted, trying to place the man in the midnight blue Tom Ford tuxedo that fit him like armor. Then came the recognition. Then came the gasps. I saw Alicia's eyes widen in the front row. She looked from my face to my shoes, realizing with horror that the man she had spit on was now walking with the stride of a predator. I saw Jordan jaw drop, his confidence draining away like water from a cracked glass. He looked for security, but the guards at the doors were my men now. I did not stop at the pews. I walked past the family, past the confused groomsmen, and climbed the 3 marble steps to the altar. I stood directly between the priest and the couple. The priest looked at me indignantly, opening his mouth to protest, but I silenced him with a single raised hand. I reached out and took the microphone from the stand. The feedback whine pierced the air, making everyone flinch. I looked at Jordan, who was trembling in his custom suit. I looked at Harrison, whose face had gone gray. I reached up and slowly straightened my silk bow tie, ensuring it was perfectly symmetrical. I let the tension build until it was suffocating. I object. My voice was amplified, booming through the cathedral, shaking the dust from the rafters. The crowd erupted into whispers. Lily looked at me with terror, thinking I was going to plead for her soul. I turned to the audience, looking directly at the camera crew that was live streaming the event. I do not object because of love. I do not object because of family loyalty. I object because of corporate integrity. As of 9 o'clock this morning, I am the sole owner of Apex Solutions, and I cannot allow 2 of my employees to enter into a legal contract funded by money they stole from my company. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. For a split second, the church was so quiet you could hear the candles flickering. Then, the shock on Jordan's face shattered into a mask of pure, unadulterated violence. The humiliation of being called a thief at his own wedding in front of the global elite was too much for his fragile ego to handle. He snapped. "You lying piece of filth!" Jordan screamed, his voice cracking. He lunged at me. He didn't care about the cameras, or the guests, or the priest standing inches away. He balled his hand into a fist and swung it with all his might, aiming directly for my jaw. He wanted to silence me. He wanted to hurt me. I did not flinch. I did not step back. As his fist came flying toward my face, I simply raised my right hand and snapped my fingers. The sound was sharp and precise, cutting through the tension like a gunshot. Jordan stopped. He didn't stop because he wanted to. He stopped because the giant LED screen behind the altar, the one that had been displaying a loop of their pretentious engagement photos, suddenly let out a loud electronic glitch. The image of Jordan and Lily kissing on a yacht distorted violently, dissolving into white static. The sudden flash of light made everyone jump. Jordan froze, his fist hovering inches from my face, distraction breaking his focus. He turned around slowly, following the gaze of the terrified guests. The static on the massive 20-foot screen cleared instantly, replaced by a deep, black background. Then, with a low bass hum that shook the floorboards, a new image faded in. It was not a wedding photo. It was a logo. A golden sun rising over a stylized mountain. The logo of Helios Capital. A collective gasp swept through the cathedral. Everyone in that room knew that symbol. It was the mark of the most aggressive private equity firm in New York. The firm that Harrison had been bragging about all week. The firm that Jordan thought was going to make him a king. Then giant bold letters began to type themselves out across the screen below the logo, one by one, synchronized with a heavy mechanical thud. Acquisition complete. Sole proprietor, Ethan Davis. My name, 10 feet tall, glowing in gold. I watched the color drain from Jordan's face. He looked from the screen to me, and then back to the screen. His brain was trying to process the impossibility of what he was seeing. The man he had forced to eat leftovers in a hallway was the man who now owned the ground he was standing on. I stepped closer to him, smoothing my lapel. "You can put your fist down, Jordan," I said, my voice amplified by the microphone I was still holding. "I wouldn't recommend assaulting your boss on his first day. It is grounds for immediate termination without severance. And looking at your financial situation, I don't think you can afford to lose your health insurance right now." Jordan lowered his hand slowly, his arm trembling uncontrollably. He looked small. He looked defeated. The giant screen behind him cast a golden halo around me, framing me as the victor before I had even finished my speech. The photos of his romance were gone. The reality of his ruin had arrived. The silence in the cathedral did not last long. It was shattered by a scream that sounded less like a human voice and more like a wounded animal. Harrison King leaped from his seat in the front row, his face a terrifying shade of purple. He scrambled over the velvet rope, knocking over a flower arrangement in his haste to get to the altar. He stood at the bottom of the marble steps, pointing a shaking finger at the giant screen behind me. "It is a trick," Harrison bellowed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "He hacked the system. Do not look at it. It is a lie. He is a fraud. He probably paid some teenager to Photoshop his name up there." He turned wildly to the security guards stationed at the perimeter, the same men who had nodded to me earlier. "What are you standing there for? Arrest him. Get him off the stage. He is trespassing. He is ruining my son's wedding. Do your jobs, or I will have you all fired." The guards did not move. They did not even blink. They stood with their hands clasped behind their backs, staring straight ahead. They knew who signed their paychecks now, and it was not the man screaming in a cheap tuxedo. Harrison looked around frantically, realizing his commands were falling on deaf ears. He turned to the crowd, pleading with the confused investors. "Please, everyone remain calm. This is just a prank, a sick, twisted prank by a jealous relative. We will have it fixed in a moment." Before he could continue his desperate spin control, the heavy oak doors to the side of the altar opened. The sound of heavy footsteps drew everyone's attention. Walking through the door was a man everyone in the room recognized. It was Arthur Vance, the longtime CEO of Apex Solutions. The man Harrison thought was currently on a golf trip in Scotland. Harrison's eyes lit up with relief. He rushed toward Vance, grabbing his arm. "Arthur, thank God you are here. Tell these people that this is insane. Tell them that Helios Capital does not belong to this truck driver." Vance stopped. He looked at Harrison, hand on his arm, with a mixture of pity and disgust. He slowly peeled Harrison's fingers off his suit jacket and smoothed the fabric. He did not say a word to Harrison. He walked right past him, as if he were a ghost. Vance ascended the steps to the altar. He stopped in front of me, and the entire room watched as the CEO of a billion-dollar company bowed his head in a gesture of absolute respect. "Good morning, Mr. Chairman Vance," said his voice clear and projecting to the back of the room. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a leather-bound folio. I am happy to report that the final transfer protocols were executed at 8:59 this morning. The board has unanimously ratified your appointment. You are now the sole owner of Apex Solutions and all its subsidiaries. The keys to the kingdom are yours, sir. Harrison let out a strangled gasp. He staggered back, clutching his chest as if he had been physically struck. Jordan dropped the microphone he was holding, and it clattered loudly on the floor. Alicia covered her mouth with her hand, sinking back into the pew. I took the folio from Vance and opened it, scanning the signatures. "Thank you, Arthur," I said calmly. "You have done excellent work keeping this quiet." I looked up at Harrison, who was trembling at the bottom of the steps. "You wanted to verify, Harrison. You wanted proof. Here is your CEO confirming that you no longer work for yourself. You work for me. And I have some performance reviews to conduct immediately." Harrison stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at Arthur Vance, with the eyes of a man watching his life support machine get unplugged. He opened his mouth to speak, to argue, to scream that this was a conspiracy, but no sound came out. He was paralyzed by the sudden shift in gravity. The power he had wielded like a cudgel for 30 years had just evaporated, leaving him exposed and trembling. I stepped forward, standing next to Vance. I did not look at the guests. I looked only at Harrison. "You seem confused, Harrison?" I said, my voice amplified and crisp. "You seem to think this is just a hostile takeover. It is not. It is an audit. And unfortunately for you, the results are catastrophic." I reached into the pocket of my tuxedo and pulled out a small black remote. I pointed it at the massive LED screen behind me. "Let us look at the first exhibit." I pressed the button. The Helios Capital logo vanished. In its place, a high-resolution spreadsheet appeared, filling the 20-foot screen with rows and rows of damning red numbers. It was a bank ledger, specifically the transaction history of the Cayman Islands account Harrison had tried to access just an hour ago. The room went deadly silent. Everyone from the back row to the front pew could see the figures. They were massive. "Do you recognize these numbers, Harrison?" I asked, stepping down one stair so I was looking down at him. "You should. You spent all night trying to hide them." Harrison's face went from pale to a sickly gray. He took a stumbling step back, almost tripping over the train of Lily's wedding dress. "That is private financial data," he croaked, his voice shaking. "You cannot show that. It is illegal. What is illegal is the content of these transfers." I countered, my voice hardening. I pressed the remote again. The screen zoomed in on a specific line item dated for that very morning. "Mr. Harrison, the $5 million you attempted to wire to a shell company in Georgetown at 8:59 this morning has been flagged and blocked by the International Banking Commission. You marked it as a consulting fee, but we both know there is no consultant. There is only you and an offshore account." A gasp rippled through the investors in the crowd. They began whispering furiously, pointing at the screen. Harrison looked around, panic setting in as he realized his peers were seeing the naked truth of his greed. "But that is just the tip of the iceberg," I continued, my voice rising over the whispers. I clicked the remote a third time. The screen changed to a graph showing a steady decline in a specific fund over the last decade. This is the Employee Pension Fund for Apex Solutions. For 10 years, hard-working men and women have been contributing to their retirement, believing their future was safe in your hands. But looking at this chart, we can see that every time the fund reached a certain threshold, money was siphoned out. I looked directly at Harrison, who was now sweating profusely, his expensive suit stained with the physical manifestation of his guilt. "You were not just stealing profit, Harrison. You were stealing livelihoods. You gutted the retirement savings of 300 employees to pay for your country club memberships, your luxury cars, and this ridiculous wedding. You stole from the janitors. You stole from the secretaries. You stole from the people who built your company while you played king." I gestured to the screen where the total amount stolen was now displayed in bold red font. $12 million. Harrison shook his head violently. "No, that is a lie. It was investment losses. The market was down. The market was up 300% in that period," I said, cutting him off cold. "You are not a victim of the economy, Harrison. You are a parasite, and I just cut off your food supply. Harrison slumped against the front pew, his legs finally giving out under the weight of his exposure. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The crowd watched him fall silent and horrified, but I did not give them time to process the tragedy of the father. I had one more monster to slay. I turned my attention to the groom. Jordan was standing frozen at the altar, his face a mask of sweat and terror. He looked at the screen behind me, hoping the nightmare would end. But I was just getting started. I raised the remote again. "We have discussed the tragedy of the pension fund," I said, my voice slicing through the air like a razor. "But theft comes in many forms. Sometimes it is hidden in the dark. And sometimes it is hidden right out in the open under the guise of business expenses." I pressed the button. The screen flashed. The somber red spreadsheet of the pension fund vanished, replaced by a collage of colorful high-definition invoices. They looked official, stamped with logos of consulting firms and international agencies. To the untrained eye, they looked like standard corporate overhead. To me, they looked like a confession. I stepped closer to Jordan until I was standing right inside his personal space. I could smell the expensive cologne he had bathed in. Cologne bought with stolen funds. "And let us not forget the groom," I said, gesturing to the screen. Jordan King, the self-proclaimed genius behind the marketing success of Apex Solutions, the man who claims to have doubled brand awareness in a year. I pointed the laser at a specific invoice on the top left corner. "Here we have a billing statement for Global Strategic Outreach, $300,000 for market research in Italy." Very impressive, Jordan. Except Global Strategic Outreach does not exist. It is a shell company registered to a post office box in Delaware. And curiously, the wire transfer for this research matches the exact sticker price of the custom Ferrari 488 Pista currently parked in the VIP spot outside. A ripple of shock went through the groomsmen. They had all admired that car earlier. They had all praised Jordan for his success. Now they looked at him like he was radioactive. Jordan's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He was drowning in the evidence. "But why stop at cars?" I continued, my voice rising with righteous anger. "Why not look at where we are standing right now?" I swept my arm across the room, gesturing to the vaulted ceilings, the thousands of white orchids, the crystal chandeliers, and the orchestra that had cost a fortune. "Look around you, everyone. This is a beautiful wedding, isn't it? The event of the season. A display of wealth and taste. But who paid for it?" I clicked the remote one last time. A final invoice appeared. It was massive, totaling over $1.5 million. It was labeled simply, "Miscellaneous Vendor Acquisition." "You billed the company for this, Jordan. You categorized your own wedding as a corporate retreat. You used the operating budget to pay for the catering, the venue, even the dress your bride is wearing." I turned to look him dead in the eye. "You called me a peasant. You mocked my clothes. You made me eat leftovers in a hallway because you said I didn't belong in your world. But here is the reality, Jordan. You are broke. You have always been broke. You are holding this wedding with my money." I took a step back, letting the accusation hang in the air. Every flower, every glass of champagne, every thread of silk in this room, I paid for it. Which means technically this is my party, and you are just the entertainment. Jordan collapsed onto the altar steps, burying his face in his hands. The groom was broken, but the family rot did not stop with the father and son. There was one more pillar of the King dynasty that needed to be toppled. I turned slowly toward the front row where Alicia King was sitting. She was clutching her pearl necklace so tightly her knuckles were white. Her face was a mask of frozen horror, but her eyes still held that flicker of defiance. She still believed she was better than me. She still believed she was untouchable because she was a socialite, and I was just the help. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at her. The silence in the cathedral was suffocating. Every eye in the room followed my gaze. "Alicia," I said, my voice soft, but amplified to reach every corner of the room. "You have been very quiet. You had so much to say on the steps outside. You had so much to say about my shoes and my breeding. You called me trash. You said I was a fraud who did not belong in your world. I raised the remote one last time. Let us see what your world actually looks like. I pressed the button. The screen behind me shifted again. Gone were the invoices and the pension funds. In their place appeared a series of screenshots. They were emails, private messages, Venmo transactions, and at the center of them all was Alicia's personal email address. The crowd leaned in, squinting to read the text. It was a list of names of interns, names of junior analysts, and next to each name was a dollar amount. Alicia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. You run the HR recruitment committee, don't you? Alicia, I asked, my voice hardening. You are the gatekeeper. You decide who gets a foot in the door at Apex Solutions. And for years you have claimed that you only hire the best and the brightest. You claimed it was a meritocracy. I pointed the laser at a specific email chain on the screen. But this email from last May tells a different story. Here you are negotiating with the father of a college dropout. He offers you $20,000. You reply asking for $30,000. 2 days later, his son is hired as a senior analyst over 3 qualified candidates from Harvard. I looked at the guests, many of whom were the very parents she had extorted. You turned the hiring process into a bidding war. You sold careers like they were tickets to a concert. You rejected brilliant young minds from state schools because their parents couldn't afford your entry fee. You filled my company with incompetent rich kids just to fund your shopping addiction. I took a step down the stairs until I was eye level with her. She was trembling now, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. You called me poor, Alicia. You mocked my poverty. But let me tell you something about being poor. It teaches you the value of hard work. It teaches you integrity. I looked at her with pure pity. Mrs. Alicia, you called me lowly. But at least I do not sell my conscience to accept kickbacks from interns. At least I do not destroy the future of this company just so I can buy another pair of shoes. You are not elite, Alicia. You are just a toll booth operator in a designer dress. And your shift is over. The silence that followed my final accusation against Alicia was heavy and absolute. The guests were too stunned to whisper. The King family stood frozen in a tableau of ruin, their secrets flayed open on the giant screen behind me. It was a masterpiece of destruction, but the final act was yet to come. I looked past the trembling family to the side entrance of the cathedral, where the sunlight was slicing through the gap in the heavy doors. I gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. That was the signal. The side doors burst open with a crash that made half the congregation jump. The tactical team from the FBI did not walk in. They flooded the room. 12 agents in windbreakers emblazoned with those 3 terrifying letters moved with military precision. They swarmed the altar, their boots heavy on the marble floor, contrasting sharply with the delicate flower petals scattered by the flower girls. Federal agents, one of them shouted, his voice commanding and loud. Nobody move. Stay in your seats. The string quartet in the balcony, confused and panicked, kept playing. The sweet, melancholic notes of Pachelbel Canon in D continued to drift down over the chaos, creating a surreal soundtrack to the dismantling of a dynasty. 2 agents grabbed Jordan. The arrogant groom who had threatened to shoot me the night before did not fight. He did not scream defiance. He crumbled. As the agents pulled his arms behind his back, I watched the facade of the tough businessman dissolve instantly. He began to sob. It was a wet, pathetic sound. It was not me, Jordan wailed, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot running from his nose. It was my father. He made me sign those papers. I didn't know. Please, I am just the VP of marketing. I didn't know anything. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was loud and distinct. Click, click, click. It was the sound of his life ending. The sound of weekends in the Hamptons being traded for years in a federal penitentiary. Harrison watched his son being manhandled, and the sight seemed to break something vital inside him. The blood that had drained from his face earlier did not return. He clutched his chest, his fingers digging into the silk of his ascot. He tried to take a step toward Jordan, but his legs refused to obey. His eyes rolled back in his head. Harrison King, the man who believed he was a god among men, collapsed. He hit the floor with a heavy, dead thud right next to the altar steps. Dad Jordan screamed, struggling against the agents holding him. "Paramedics, get a medic in here," an agent shouted, kneeling beside Harrison. Alicia was the last to fall. An agent approached her, holding up a warrant. She looked at the handcuffs in his hand with a mixture of confusion and disgust, as if he were offering her a dirty napkin. "You cannot do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We are the kings. We own this city." "Not anymore, Mrs. King," the agent said, spinning her around. I stood on the altar alone and untouched, watching them fall one by one. The music finally died as the conductor realized the party was over. The only sounds left were the sobbing of the groom, the chaotic orders of the medics working on Harrison, and the click of steel closing around Alicia's wrists. The empire was not just conquered, it was erased. The chaotic symphony of justice continued to swirl around the altar. But amidst the shouting agents and the weeping guests, one figure broke through the confusion. It was Lily, my sister. The woman who had spent the last week pretending I was an invisible stain on her perfect life. She watched as the agents dragged Jordan toward the side exit, his expensive Italian loafers scraping uselessly against the marble. She watched as the paramedics loaded Harrison onto a stretcher, his chest rising and falling in shallow, terrified gasps. Her dream was being dismantled piece by piece. She looked around wildly, her eyes finally landing on the only person standing still in the center of the storm. Me. She ran to me. In her haste, she tripped over the hem of her Vera Wang gown. The delicate lace tore with a sickening rip, and the pristine white fabric dragged through the dust and the scuff marks left by the boots of the tactical team. She did not care. She scrambled up the steps and threw herself at my feet, grabbing my tuxedo pants with desperate clawing hands. "Ethan, please," she screamed, her voice raw and hysterical. "You have to stop them. You are the owner now, right? You can tell them to stop. He is my husband, Ethan." I looked down at her. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black rivulets, making her look like a tragic clown. This was the same woman who had laughed when Jordan threatened to shoot me. This was the same woman who had tried to steal our parents' retirement fund for a necklace. "We are family," she sobbed, burying her face against my shoes. "We share the same blood. How can you do this to us? Please, Ethan, spare him. I am begging you." I felt nothing, no pity, no anger, just a cold, hollow clarity. I reached down and peeled her fingers off my leg one by one. I did not help her stand up. I let her stay on her knees where she belonged. "You seem to be confused about the definition of family, Lily," I said, my voice flat and devoid of warmth. "Family protects each other. Family does not let their brother eat garbage in a hallway. Family does not spit on their brother's shoes." I took a step back, putting distance between us. "You made a choice in that bridal suite 20 minutes ago. I gave you a lifeboat. I told you the truth. I offered you a way out. And you looked me in the eye and told me you would rather be a rich criminal than a poor nobody." Lily looked up at me, her eyes wide with horror as the weight of her mistake crushed her. "But I didn't think you would actually do it," she whispered. "Actions have consequences," I replied. "And now you have to live with yours. You wanted to be a king so badly, well, congratulations. You are one. You are now the wife of a felon." I gestured to the agents hauling Jordan out the door. "Every asset he owns is frozen. The cars, the house, the bank accounts. Even that ring on your finger is evidence purchased with stolen funds. They are going to take it all, Lily. You are walking out of this church with nothing but the dress on your back and a mountain of legal debt." I turned away from her, signaling to my security team that I was done. "Good luck with the poverty you always despised," I said over my shoulder. "You are going to find out that it is much harder to survive when you don't have a brother to bail you out." I walked down the aisle, leaving her kneeling in the ruin of her own greed, sobbing into the empty air. I turned my back on the sobbing bride and faced the congregation. The church was still buzzing with the aftershocks of the arrest, but the air felt lighter. The heaviness of the King family's oppression had been lifted, and now only the truth remained. The investors, the partners, and the titans of industry, who had come here to network, were looking at me with a mixture of fear and respect. They realized that the power dynamic in New York had shifted in the span of 10 minutes. I walked to the edge of the altar, my footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. I did not need the microphone anymore. My voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my gaze sweeping across the room. I apologize for the interruption to your Saturday. I know you came here expecting a union of two families. Instead, you witnessed the dissolution of a criminal enterprise. I paused, letting the words sink in. Apex Solutions has been operating under a cloud of corruption for far too long. Harrison and Jordan King treated the company like a personal piggy bank. They treated their employees like disposable tools. They believed that profit justified cruelty. They were wrong. I looked directly at the camera crew who were still broadcasting live to the world. To the employees of Apex Solutions watching this feed, I have a message for you. The era of fear is over. The days of looking over your shoulder wondering if you will be fired to pay for an executive's vacation are gone. We are going to rebuild this company, and we are going to do it with integrity. I thought of Mrs. Higgins, the loyal assistant Harrison had fired just yesterday to save money for his getaway. Starting immediately, I am initiating a complete forensic audit of all personnel files. Any employee who was wrongfully terminated by the King regime in the last 5 years is invited to return. Your jobs are waiting for you, and to apologize for the indignity you suffered, your starting salaries will be double what they were when you left. A murmur of disbelief went through the crowd. In the cutthroat world of corporate finance, this was unheard of. It was not just business, it was justice. I straightened my cuffs, looking down at the empty seats in the front row, where the Kings had sat just moments ago. As for Harrison Jordan and Alicia King, I said, my voice dropping to a final steely register. Their access cards have been deactivated. Their stock options have been seized to repay the pension fund they stole. And let the record show that as of this moment, they have been permanently fired. For a second, there was silence. Then it started. A single clap from the back of the room. It was one of the catering staff, a young woman who had been yelled at by Alicia earlier that morning. Then a waiter joined in, then the security guards. Finally, the neutral guests, the investors who had been cheated by Harrison, began to applaud. The sound grew into a roar, a thunderous ovation, not for a wedding, but for a liberation. I looked at the cross hanging above the altar. The Kings were gone. The castle was mine. The heavy oak doors of St. Jude Cathedral groaned shut behind me, muffling the chaotic symphony of justice I had just orchestrated. The sound of weeping and the sharp click of handcuffs faded into a dull roar, leaving me in the sudden quiet of the city afternoon. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long golden shadows across the pavement. I took a deep breath. The air tasted different out here. It tasted clean. It tasted like absolute victory. Waiting at the curb, exactly where I had ordered it to be, was the Rolls-Royce Phantom. Its polished black paint absorbed the sunlight, looking like a void in the universe. A uniformed driver stood by the rear door, his face impassive. He did not look at me like a pauper or a truck driver. He looked at me like the man who signed his paycheck. He opened the door with a respectful nod. I slid into the back seat, the smell of hand-stitched leather enveloping me like a cocoon. I did not look back at the church. I did not look back at the sister who was currently screaming my name, or the brother-in-law who was being read his Miranda rights. They were history. I was the future. I pulled out my encrypted phone and dialed a number I had saved for this exact moment. It rang once before being picked up. Mr. Davis, the voice on the other end said, crisp and professional. It is done, I said, watching the city begin to move past the tinted windows. The seizure orders have been executed. The King family assets are currently being liquidated by the federal authorities. I know, sir. We are seeing the alerts now. What are your instructions for the recovered capital? I looked down at the Patek Philippe watch in my hand, the one Jordan had thrown in the trash. I rubbed my thumb over the crystal face. Take it all, I said, my voice steady. The $5 million from the offshore account. The proceeds from the sale of their houses, their cars, and even the jewelry on their wrists. Every single penny. And transfer it to where, sir? To the Helios corporate account. No, I said, a small smile touching my lips. Transfer it to the Apex Solutions Employee Relief Fund. Restore the pensions they stole. Pay the medical bills for the staff they fired. And whatever is left over, donate it to the city homeless shelter. Put it in Harrison King's name. Let that be his only legacy. I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the seat beside me. The car glided forward, the engine a silent hum of power. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water from the center console and looked out at the skyline of New York. Voiceover. They laughed at me because I was different. They mocked my clothes, my silence, and my apparent poverty. They thought status was something you wore. They thought power was something you shouted. But I laughed at them because they were all the same. Greedy, stupid, and entirely predictable. The sweetest revenge is not about violence. It is not about raising a hand in anger. It is simply about handing your enemies the rope and watching them tie the knot themselves. I did not destroy the King family. I simply turned on the lights and let the world see the rot that was already there. The Rolls-Royce turned onto the highway, accelerating toward the setting sun. The light turned the skyscrapers into pillars of fire. They are finished. They will spend the rest of their lives paying for their sins in a cage of their own making. But me, I am just getting started. The empire is clean now, and tomorrow we build. The story of Ethan and the King family serves as a profound masterclass in the dangers of arrogance and the quiet power of integrity. At its core, the narrative deconstructs the illusion of status. The Kings believed that power was demonstrated through loud assertions, expensive clothing, and the belittling of others. They equated Ethan's silence with weakness and his humble appearance with failure. This superficial judgment was their fatal error. They were so busy performing the role of the elite that they forgot the fundamental rules of business and morality, transparency, and honesty. Ethan represents the strategic advantage of being underestimated. He moved in silence, allowing his enemies to reveal their true nature without interference. He offered them chances to show humanity, giving Jordan the watch warning Lily in the bridal suite, but their greed blinded them to these lifelines. The lesson here is that true wealth is not found in a bank account or a designer label, but in one's character. The Kings built a castle on a foundation of sand fraud, theft, and lies, and were surprised when it collapsed. Ethan built his empire on facts and legal leverage. Ultimately, this story teaches us that how we treat those we perceive as inferior is the truest reflection of our worth. You can wear a bespoke suit and drive a Ferrari, but if your integrity is bankrupt, you are poorer than the man sleeping in his truck. Success built on the suffering of others is not success. It is a loan from karma, and eventually the interest must be paid. If you enjoyed this story of calculated justice and want to see more tales of revenge and redemption, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications now.